This is Retro Sports Radio. Visit RetroSeasons.com for more sports history.
Phone calls have made such an important impact on your career, your life. And in 1981, you got another phone call from a little bitty town in northern New York, Cooperstown.
Yeah, right. They didn't call me direct for some reason. I don't know what the procedure is at Cooperstown for the Ford C. Frick winner, and that was the award I won that got me into the Hall of Fame. But they had called Jim Campbell. Maybe they were trying to find me because I was down in Florida. And Lula called me to the phone and said, "It's Mr. Campbell." And I answered the phone, and Jim said, "Congratulations." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you've been elected to the Hall of Fame." And that probably was the biggest thrill that I've ever had because it meant going up there and being on the platform with those great players and having all the family there. It was a great thing for me, and it was a phone call that I really cherish.
The Tigers get back to the World Series in 1984. Great start to the season. You go 35-5 right out of the chute. That just propelled that team to great things.
Oh, it did. When you win 35 out of the first 40 games, you've got such a nice cushion that you know unless there's a complete collapse, you're going to make the playoffs. But ironically, Sparky Anderson told me that that was the most nervous season he'd gone through as a manager because the Tigers were establishing this magnificent record. Sparky always feared they would hit the playoffs and be eliminated and not get in the World Series, and it would take away the achievement of the team in the regular season. And it did bother him a lot. They didn't have a lot of superstars, but they had Jack Morris and Lance Parrish and Gibby and some of those guys. And Trammell, of course, was a superstar, and Whitaker. But they seemed to just get together and do the right thing, and they built confidence as it went along. And it was a great season to be around. But I remember one incident that we had in Anaheim. The Tigers had been on Sports Illustrated. They'd been in Sporting News. Spark had been featured on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Everybody was writing about Sparky and the Tigers, and they were breaking the record for most consecutive road wins. And they won a game in Anaheim, and they won another game in Anaheim, and we were getting ready to go to Seattle. And Sparky and I was sitting in the coffee shop there at the hotel in Anaheim, and a guy comes up and interferes with Sparky's breakfast. He says, "Hey, I'm from San Diego, Spark, and I used to be in Cincinnati. I'm a great Cincinnati fan, the Big Red Machine. You are the greatest manager in baseball. You are simply terrific. By the way, what are you doing now?" And Sparky went back to his cornflakes immediately.
They did not lose in the playoffs. They advanced to the World Series. How'd they take care of business?
Well, they took care of business with good pitching and good balance. They swept the series with Kansas City. They had no trouble at all with the Kansas City team. Then I think most of the people around Detroit were sort of hoping that the Cubs would win their playoff and those two teams would meet in the World Series because there was somewhat of a rivalry between Chicago and Detroit. But Mr. Garvey saw differently, and he led the San Diego Padres past the Cubs, and the Padres were the team that represented the National League against the Tigers. And the Tigers went out there, opened the series, and won the first game, lost the second, and then won all the others. And it was a great time in Detroit. The celebration was marred to some extent by a guy barbecuing a taxi cab, and that picture got all over the world. It wasn't really symbolic of the city at that time, but people made the world feel that it was. But it was a great time in Detroit, and I think we still celebrate that '84 team.
There was a dramatic moment in that ball game, and you alluded to Gibby a few minutes ago. Kirk Gibson hit a dramatic home run in the eighth inning that put the Tigers up and pretty much wrapped up the series, didn't it?
Well, that iced it, yeah, and he hit it against Gossage, who had always been a nemesis of Gibby's, and the first time they'd ever met, Goose struck him out, and Goose talked Dick Williams into keeping him in the ball game, and after that short conversation, Gibby parked one in the upper deck in right field for the climactic home run of that World Series.
Here's the pitch. He swings as a long drive to right, and it is a home run for Gibson. A three-run homer. The Tigers lead it 8-4 in the eighth inning.
Who would win, 68 or 84?
Well, I've dodged that question all my life, so I'm going to dodge it one more time, I think. They were two great teams, And I think they are my favorite teams. I did pick the Yankees as the best team, but my favorite team would be one of those two, 68 or 84. I'd say it ended in a flat-footed tie. But both of those teams got off to a good start, and they had great balance. Each had a terrific catcher, Bill Freehand and Lance Parrish. They had a good keystone combination, and they had a good center fielder. So that was a great fundamental fact for each one of those teams. And the 68 team had an interesting year because they were more of a come-from-behind team. They got out in front early in the season, and they were in the first place except for 6 games. But as far as an individual game, they always had a different hero. They'd get a guy off the bench that would hit a home run. Tommy Matchik, Dick Tracewski, Jim Price, somebody like that would hit a home run. They had a great home run hitter in Willie Horton, but they didn't have a 300 hitter for the season, not among the regulars. Willie Horton led the team hitting about 285. But they had good power, and they had pretty good speed, and they had great defense. And, of course, they had terrific pitching in Denny McLain, Mickey Lolich, and Earl Wilson. And they didn't have the bullpen that the 84 team had. But in those days, you didn't depend on the bullpen like you do now. In 84, of course, they got up to the 35-5 record, and they had a great team. And I don't know, you'll never beat Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell. And they had a terrific center fielder in Chet Lemon. And Darrell Evans came and hit a lot of home runs and helped out. So it was just a great team, and I don't think one's any better than the other. I'm not going to make a choice there.
It seems like, I don't know whether it's a prerequisite for a Hall of Fame denotation, but a lot of Hall of Fame broadcasters, including you and I, have been fired at one time or another.
Yes, Bob. Quite a few Hall of Famers have been fired in the course of their careers. Mel Allen and Red Barber, the first two that ever went into the Hall of Fame, were both fired by the New York Yankees. And then a lot of the other announcers, Harry Carey, for instance, has been fired. I got fired in 1990. We had a meeting at Tigers Stadium, and the Tigers told me that I would work one more year, and after that I wouldn't come back. And I understood that. I think when you work for somebody, he's got a right to hire you and he's got a right to fire you. And also I realize as a baseball historian that nobody lasts forever and everybody can be replaced. And I never held any bitterness or acrimony about that. I just went ahead and tried to do the job. And after the 1991 season, which was my final season, I worked for the California Angels. I did some games for them. And I did the Game of the Week for CBS, which I had done from time to time before when I could get off. But it was a part of my career that really got me into the national spotlight a little bit more than I had been. And I think, as the Bible tells us, all things happen for good. And I think it was probably the best thing in the long run that ever happened in my career.
When a door closes, a window opens. And sure enough, a great window opened for you, because then you took your integrity that you'd had in the booth and you went into the corporate America world for what was going to be a brief period of time, but it's turned out to be almost a second career.
It is a second career, and I've been with the Blue Cross Blue Shield as their spokesman. I've done a lot of commercials. I've worked for different companies. I've met a lot of people in industry and commerce that have helped me out and made me feel a lot better and certainly aided my career in the long run.
1993 brings a change in ownership of the Tigers and a chance for you to return to the broadcast booth.
One of the great things that happened to me in my career, my lifetime for that matter, was that Mike Ilitch, after he bought the Tigers, one of the first things he did was to bring me back to the Tigers. My agent, Gary Spicer, had called him from Arizona. He said, "Come in and bring Ernie. I want to talk to you." The next day, we got in there. They fixed up a letter in 20 minutes, and I was back with the Tigers.
September 27th, 1999, Ernie, you would say goodbye to an old friend. Tiger Stadium, that was the last home game that you got to work in that facility. It was with Kansas City, and a grand slam homer in the bottom of the eighth by Robert Fick kind of set things up for you to take it through the ninth inning and wish that stadium goodbye.
It was a wonderful time for me, and I think for all the fans of Detroit, and a little bittersweet, though, because we were saying goodbye to the old ballpark that everybody had loved over the years. And the great thing was that all the old Tigers were brought back. They had a terrific ceremony. Eldon Arca and Brad Osmus, the two representatives of the new and the old Tigers. And the terrific thing about that whole night, Bob, was the reverence that the crowd showed to Old Tiger Stadium, because they had a jam-packed stadium, and a little incident that might have been untoward could have ruined the whole program. But all these people jammed in together with a common bond, the love for the ballpark. They were very reverent of it, and the program went off without a hitch, and I think everybody really enjoyed it. It was a time of great sentiment for me because I was losing an old friend, and I think I almost broke up right at the end of my little speech there, but I did make it through, and it was a great day and a great night, and I will always cherish that moment.
And the big crowd now anticipating the end of this game. 8-2, the Tigers in the lead. And here's the set by Jonesy in the pitch. It's the ball. Now, folks, I'm going to say my goodbye to Tiger Stadium, so I'm going to forget about the play-by-play for a moment. How do you talk to a legend? Can you say goodbye to a shrine? Can you walk away from a treasure? It's not easy. You do it with a lump in your throat and a tear in your eye. For almost 40 years, I've spent as much time at the corner of Michigan and Trumbull as I have at home. I've been elated, dejected, thrilled, and disappointed here. I've sweltered through the summer heat. I've frozen in the spring and fall. In sickness and in health, it's been my home, my office, and my refuge. When I first came here to broadcast, it was Briggs Stadium and then Tiger Stadium. And somewhere along the way, I began to call it the corner of Michigan and Trumbull, and soon shortened that to just the corner. To me, it will always be the corner, the most famous corner in Michigan. Tiger Stadium has been a dear friend, and even though I look forward to our new home, Comerica Park, and to the thrill of watching new Tiger stars, this old corner and its great players will remain a timeless gift to the past. The corner is part of our history, our heritage. It's been magic, hope, and the true heartbeat of our city. Baseball memories have come here to live and to be treasured. And you and I have been part of those memories. We've thrilled to the home runs, the strikeouts, the double plays. From generation to generation, we've joined that joyous crowd. And all of us love this old place. And its closing tugs at our heart. And like you, like all of us, I will cherish its memories. I know that there's never been a corner like Michigan and Trumbull.
Now comes 2002, your final season in the booth at Detroit. Did you do a farewell tour, so to speak? Players sometimes when they retire, the different cities around the league will honor them with a chair or with, different things like that. Did you have anything like that happen?
Well, we did have that. I really didn't like that very much, but it was something that you couldn't turn down. And you'd go to a certain city, Cleveland or wherever, and they'd say, look, we want to have a little thing on the scoreboard about you, and we want to make a presentation. Or maybe they'd say, we'd like for you to throw out the first ball. And that was very thoughtful of them. And some places, we'd like to name the visiting radio booth after you. And it's something that you deeply appreciate, and you don't want to offend anybody. But it got to a point where it was almost the only time I could relax that season was when I was in the radio booth broadcasting the game, because the people probably paid me a lot more attention than I deserved, and it would have been a lot better if I had just gone my way without it. But there wasn't any way to avoid it.
Did you do anything differently that year in the booth once you got on the air?
I've always felt that the game is the thing, and the announcer is just a small part of it. People tune in to hear the game. They want to know whether the Tigers are winning or losing, what the score is, and it doesn't matter who's doing the game. They're going to tune in whether you work or you don't work because they are interested in baseball. Therefore, I think the game has to be the focus of the announcer and not himself.
Any regrets in leaving the booth when you did?
No, I don't think so. I felt like I wanted to quit while I was still doing fairly well. I didn't want everybody to get to the point where they were saying in large numbers, why didn't that old guy hang it up and let somebody take over that can do the job? I didn't want to leave with that kind of a feeling, and I felt like if I made a mistake quitting too early, that was better than making a mistake and staying too long.
Detroit Tigers, WJR.